Wow, that's really dark. But we are live, and it's 7 o'clock. I'm gonna have to hook this up just a little bit here. Yeah, there we are now. Now we're a lot better. Now everybody can see. It is 7:08 right on. Thanks for showing up, Tim. Friday night. Hopefully everyone's doing good. Today I posted a video on my backdrop is moving around. Getting crazy on me. There we go. Posted a video up on running a dual plane intake, both on a small block Ford and an LS application, running a dual plane intake under boost, because I get a lot of comments from people about, hey, everybody knows you can run a single plane. Obviously that works. Everybody does that. Everybody blows through a single plane with a carburetor, or blows through it with one of the, throttle body injections, or they blow through it with a regular throttle body, like a 4-hole throttle body, or even a single throttle body and an elbow and port injection as well, because that also works. But the question is, can you do that with a dual plane manifold? And I honestly don't really understand this question. I don't understand why they would think that wouldn't work for some reason. But the reality is it works very well. In fact, it works, not surprisingly so, exactly like a dual plane works when it's naturally aspirated. In fact, if anything, in the testing that I did on the LS application, what we saw is, if you guys have taken a look at that video, that blowing through, in this case, we were blowing through the CSU 850 blow-through carburetor that we use on most things with the dual plane. When you blow through that carburetor, actually the air fuel distribution in all of the runners tends to improve under boost. If anything, it was really bad or suspect when it was naturally aspirated. And that is always the scary thing about running 802 sensors when you're running, like when we're running fuel injected stuff. And I did a test where we ran a single plane intake manifold, and I ran it basically, batch fire. I think we also ran it with a carburetor, and then we ran it fuel injected with the batch fire, and then sequential, and then individual cylinder trimming. Because as we saw, and again, not surprisingly so, that on a single plane intake manifold, when we did that test with 802s, that the air fuel was like all over the board. And not only was it all over the board in the long runners and the short runners, but as we went through the RPM range, the air fuel distribution changed with RPM as well. So it was different statically, basically, and different at different RPMs. So it's kind of the worst of the possible situations. So when we went in and changed it, we didn't see, in that test, we didn't see a great deal of power change. But what we obviously would see is you would see reliability. And that's also very important. In my opinion, even more important than a power change than we would see, because having one of the cylinders be 15 to 1 and one of them be 11.5 to 1, especially on a supercharged or turbocharged combination where it should be, having one of them be 15 to 1, it will last temporarily. But if it's 15 to 1 for very long under boost, something bad is definitely going to happen, and could even happen on a naturally aspirated combination, because we've run naturally aspirated combinations that are too lean for too long, and the same thing happens. You'll start scuffing a piston, and just in general, bad things will happen. It's not a good idea. So the interesting thing is, when we ran 802 sensors, and we didn't do that on the Ford, we just ran it as a blow through with a Performer RPM. I think it was an air gap on that one, a Performer RPM air gap on the Ford, and it was a mild 327 stroker combination. And we ran it as a blow through with a Paxton supercharger blowing into the carb bonnet that both Paxton and Vortex sold, that enclosed the carburetor, because it's easier. You can use kind of a standard version of a carburetor, because the whole thing is pressurized, not just the way that we pressurize it with a bonnet over it, which we normally run with the CSU blow through carburetor. You don't have to have a blow through carburetor. You just have a regular carburetor, basically, because the whole thing is pressurized. So it makes life a little easier. But with the dual plane manifold, blowing through with a Paxton, or we also did it with a turbo, both of those work just fine. Now, we didn't have and especially with the turbo, we didn't have 8 O2 sensors to tell us whether or not all of the cylinders were fine, but we did have that with the LS. So when we ran the LS, we ran a Performer RPM carbureted manifold, and then the MSD ignition controller so that we could control the timing, because obviously we're running less timing on the boosted application than we are on the naturally aspirated version. We also ran that combination on the LS with an intercooler. We ran good gas on it so that we didn't hurt anything, which probably gave us, in looking at the air-fuel ratio, probably gave us a little bit more leeway than we would normally have if you're running pump gas, which is one of the concerns I always have when guys say, well, why don't you just run all your testing on 91, and you could just run 91 and then you could run water meth. Well, this is why we don't do that, because I like to have the extra safety margin. And as we saw on the air fuel, when we added boost to the dual plane intake on the LS, it actually kind of brought the air fuel ratios of a lot of the cylinders together. Now, we still had two what I would call dissenting cylinders that still wanted to be lean. And other than possibly stagger jetting, although that doesn't normally work as well unless the two cylinders are paired, then you could do stagger jetting and then just do one corner and possibly address that. Otherwise, you have to go in and start really going after. Now, you could do that with port injection, obviously, if you have, individual injectors in each of the cylinders. And I even addressed that a little bit at the end of the video, where I talk about the fact that a lot of guys, for whatever reason, think that you can't run port injection on a dual plane manifold. For some reason, its design doesn't lend itself to port injection, but nothing could be further from the truth. It actually works just fine. If it works with carburation or even throttle body injection, where the injectors are ejecting into the same spot where it comes in with a carburetor, if it works there, it's definitely going to work. It's going to work even better as port injection. The one problem that you might have on the dual plane is actually getting it's very easy with a single plane, because you can have all the injectors kind of in the same spot, and then the height of the fuel rail is consistent and it's easy to bolt on and all that. You might have a little bit of a problem doing that with a dual plane manifold, but that's not an insurmountable thing. Even if you made the injectors at different positions, relative to the cylinder head port, if they were at different heights, just so that you could have the fuel rail be flat and straight and consistent, it really wouldn't matter. I mean, you're looking at such different runner lengths and designs with a dual plane manifold anyway, that I honestly don't think that you'd see very much of a change there. But it would be interesting to run. I've seen a couple of dual plane EFI manifolds. I think Hughes makes one, or they did make one for the Dodge Magnum. And then the guys at Speedmaster had one for a dual plane that we never got to try, because for some reason it wouldn't fit. And I think that the ports were really, really big on it. There was some other issue that stopped us from actually testing it, but they did offer one. And so we know that from a practical standpoint, that a dual plane would definitely work with port injection. But on this test, we didn't do that. We did a blow through carbureted application, and it worked just fine. In fact, one thing I didn't post for Monsters here, what's going on? Mike's here, lots of good ProCharge Mopar. On the carbureted LS version, where we ran the dual plane, I actually also ran that with a single plane, because in that test originally, I was comparing the single plane to the dual plane, which I did both naturally aspirated and with the blower on it. And guess what? The same thing happened. The single plane, makes a little bit more power on the top and less down low. The signal's worse to the carburetor. You have to change the jetting because of the intake manifold design, because of that signal to the carburetor, because the amount of fuel that gets drawn in is a function of the signal to that carburetor. So when you change that signal, you have to change the jetting to get the required fuel. And normally what happens is a single plane manifold requires more jetting than the dual plane does, because the draw from the dual plane is going to be much greater, especially if it's a fully divided dual plane, where the divider goes all the way up to the carburetor. Then the signal's much better, because you basically have half of the motor drawing through two of the barrels, rather than with each one drawing through a common plenum. So the signal goes down, just like when we put a big 4-hole open spacer, which you'll see in an upcoming episode of Engine Masters, where Freiberger and I bet that you know, he said what a lot of people said in the comments when I did the testing on the 4-hole versus the open carburetor spacer. Oh no, the open spacer is going to work a lot better. And he bet me that it would make more power. And actually it did. The open spacer made like about this much power more. And so I paid him because it made 2 or 3 or whatever more horsepower at the top. But everywhere else, the 4-hole actually did a lot better. And to his credit, he ended up giving me the money back because he said, look, you know, even though on a technicality, because he was very, you know, he's fairly sharp. He's been doing this a long time. So he said, I'm betting you that the open spacer makes more power, more peak power. I'm like, yeah, I like the way you phrase that because you know what's going to happen. And I said, look, what always happens with these, and he's done this a lot. They've done Engine Masters testing a bunch, him and Brule and stuff. So they know what the deal is. What happens is when you put an open spacer in, and I know that this is a tangent that we're going on, but when you put an open spacer on a dual plane intake manifold, what it does is just rocks the curve. It makes it a little bit more like a single plane. So it picks up power at the top, but it usually loses power down low. But when we put the 4-hole spacer on, it just, you know, it retains the carb signal because it's a 4-hole spacer, and depending on which kind you use. But that's exactly what happened when we ran it on the Dodge, and it made more power basically everywhere except at the very top where the open spacer was able to make a little bit more power. So that's what happened when we did that combination. But when we did the LS, when I tested that, we did the single plane and then we did the dual plane NA, and then we did the single plane and the dual plane with the blower, and they did basically the same things. And that's you know, fairly common now. We see that a lot, and I've posted enough videos where you guys have seen when we run a short runner manifold and a long runner manifold NA, and then we had boost, they do the same things because the manifold just determines where the motor is going to be effective. What is the effective operating range? The dual plane is different than a single plane, and it is that same thing basically under boost. And not only is it the same thing under boost, but it's the same thing under different kinds of boost. Like we ran them both with, on the Ford, we ran them both with centrifugal blowers, in that case a Paxton and Novi 1200. And then I also ran the same thing with a turbo. And because we were blowing through the same carburetor with the same carburetor enclosure, you know, it didn't care. It doesn't know that it's getting boost from a turbo. Obviously, got lots of boost earlier and stuff, but it just knows that it's blowing through the carburetor, and that manifold is going to determine, you know, where the thing wants to make good power. The thing that changed it a little bit is on a relative to the carburetor and the intake design, because we had a turbo on it, which had, you know, a fairly consistent amount of boost. Compared to the rising boost curve of the centrifugal supercharger, the rising curve kind of artificially allowed the thing to make power at a higher engine speed because of the rising boost curve. It artificially does that, but it does that regardless. So that's not a function of the intake manifold. The intake manifold still wants to make power where the intake manifold wants to make power. And I guess the upshot of all of this is basically that a dual plane manifold works just fine under boost, as does kind of every other manifold. Like if we would have run a 2-barrel on there, it would have just been a 2-barrel with boost on it. If we could have gotten a 2-barrel blow through carburetor, or we could have enclosed it in kind of an enclosure there. Although I don't know if somebody makes an enclosure designed for a 2-barrel, because I don't know why you would do that. You would want more carburation than that, at least some kind of little 4-barrel on there. I have done a blow through application on a 2-barrel with a bonnet on top of it, but it was the Holley, like the 5512, the XP version of that, and we just put big jets in it so that I could run it with E85, and we blew through that, I think, on the 6-cylinder on the 292 when we ran a turbo on that. But it does, you know, that works as long as you get the right amount of fuel. And blowing through that, it didn't know that it was a blow through carburetor, basically just knew that it had lots of airflow, and I have to supply a lot of fuel because we ran E85, so we went up to like, you know, 99 jets or whatever would fit in there so that we could make sure that we got enough fuel. But it worked out just fine. So the moral of the story and the upshot of all this is intake manifolds work under boost, and they do the same thing that they do NA. But I'm surprised at how often I get that question. Hey, can I run a dual plane? Because they know that they want to run a dual plane, especially for guys that want to run boost on milder combinations. They're going down the right path, by choosing the dual plane and saying, hey, look, I know that this is a sub 6,000 RPM motor, so the dual plane is definitely the right choice. But now what happens when I run boost? Can I retain the dual plane? And obviously, as this video shows, the answer is always yes. So let's see what you guys got going on a Friday night. Arc, I have mastered Q-Jet tuning. Step 1, by a swap meet Edelbrock dual plane intake. Yeah, that works very well. Or what works really good is actually factory intake manifolds that were designed for Q-Jets work very well also. Step 2, buy a factory reman Holly 3310. Okay, that's a good. I would like to see somebody do a blow-through quadrijet. I never have, and I'd have to ask Brulé if they ever have. I don't know if they have either. I've seen a quadrijet as a draw-through turbo, but I've not seen one run a blow-through quadrijet. Yes, Dan, that's also true, and that's usually an open one. Is the Dan said that the spacer that makes the most power, like the carb spacer that makes the most power, also has spray bars in it that inject the nitrous in it. Hello, are you? Oh, cool. A local junkyard here has a sale, $50, all you can carry out. I love the videos that guys do of that, where it's anything that you can carry. And they get the big guys on there with like the backpacks that have like an engine in the backpack, or they've got the bars, they've got like this big crossbar with straps on it, and they're carrying out like 2 transmissions or something. And I think that's just fantastic. Oil pumps do change the power. That's right. Dry sumps can definitely change the power. They can definitely add power. The average Q-Jet is 650, although you can get some of the bigger ones that are 800, like the Cadillac and the Buick, and I think some of those are 800. It'd be interesting thing to see if guys have the if you could tune one of the feedback quadrijets. And the really cool thing is that when I was out with the guys when I was with Courtney from Cadco out there in Albuquerque, when we were doing the Cadillac testing, he showed me the Cadillac Q-Jet that also has the little diaphragm that registers changes in altitude, basically, which I thought was really cool. Altitude compensation from the carburetor, which I thought was that's kind of a neat deal. .289 makes 300 horsepower. SN95 Paxton carbon closed 8 psi makes 490. Nice. Any recommendations for a Jeep 4-liter GT35 turbo setup? That sounds like you have a good setup already. Is it a blow-through carbureted deal, or is it a EFI? When we'll get to see more of the 2.2, as soon as I get back down to West Tech, my next trip down, I'm taking the 2.5 out, and I'm going to do an autopsy on what's going on with the 2.5, because when I'm down there and I pull it out of the car, when I pull it out of the GLH, I'm going to disassemble it also, and I'll do a video on that. But the 2.2, the guys, John Mahovitz from AccuFab is going to have to build an adapter plate so I can mount the bell housing to the dyno. Vin, can I spray a 500 or 50 horsepower shot of nitrous to help my twin turbo 472 Cadillac spool quicker? Yes, you can. I'm surprised that you need help with a 472. You must have some big turbos on there. We will run nitrous on the 2.2 or the 2.5. I don't know on the 2.5 until I take it apart. I don't know if there are holes in the pistons. I know that he said that he was running lots and lots of boost. So he was talking about 20 or 25 pounds or something. So if something, there's, you know, there's every possibility that a piston is damaged, or more than one. How long before the Aussie Barra showdown? I don't know. I haven't even run the Barra yet. How would you make max torque on 89 351 for towing? You're going to need better heads and a mild camshaft, and long tube headers would all be things that I would do. I haven't done any turbo only on the 3800 yet. I haven't done any more testing since we ran the compound stuff. I have, if the question was forged pistons or casts, and I have forged Weisskos for the 2.5, assuming that the bores are not damaged. Is the LQ9 still a good option for boost? Yes, it's a perfect one. Oh, the 1 liter Bonneville engine. That's top secret. If I tell people, then they're going to do it. Is low compression a problem with nitrous? No, it's not. A 95 Chevy 1-ton dually might be a roller cam. 95 should still be a Gen 5, but the Gen 5s, the later Gen 5s, had provisions for hydraulic rollers in them. So I was told that some of them have them. I've never run across one. All the ones I've run across are flat tappets. So maybe. Stock GM 502 block, Cali stroker crank, Dart 360 heads, twin 88s on meth. Well, your twin 88s will support a lot of power. I think if it's a stock 502 block, then you're going to reach the limit of the block before you reach the limit of those 288s. Have you ever run a Sneaky Pete or other nitrous or other stealthy nitrous setup? We have hidden them, but not where I've hidden it on my person though. The turbo on the 2.5 is from the same guy that did the manifold, but I don't know which one it is. Lazy Hound Racing. I have 2 quick fill 650 carburetors on my. You have an inline 6-cylinder 292 with a 671 on it? That's more than enough carburation for that motor. Your head flows 340, and it's the 292 head flows 340. Richard, what do you think about pistons with purpose drilled holes in the pistons which react to pressure increase due to turbos? So you're talking about gas ported pistons? Gas ported pistons, I think, are usually done on NA applications. I don't know if guys are using them on turbo stuff. One liter is a go-kart engine. I drove a go-kart that had an RD400 engine in it, and that's not even a 1 liter. That's only 0.4 of a liter, and it was really fast. Yes, I know the Daryl Alderman story in the batteries. That was pretty amazing. I know, Dan, a 292 head that flows 340 is a lot. James, what's up? Can you put a turbo on a blower on a gas motor like they did on a Detroit diesel? Take a look at the video that I have up already on compound turbo blower that we did on the 3800. So the answer is yes, you can do that. Richard, I just put a Vortec V7 YSI AFR 325s, my 12-to-1 compression, 720 lift, all motor, cam, big block, 439. Did I create a bomb? On E85, you might be okay. Oh, so it's a Ryan Falconer V12 head on your 292? What horsepower does the sloppy stage 2 start falling off? That's not how cams work. I haven't done any testing with the 2650 Kong blower. I'd like to. (2006) BMW 330xi. Have you ever done kind of mods to naturally aspirated 3-liter motor? It's going to have, you're going to want to do the same things that everybody else does. You're going to want to do some kind of intake manifold. I don't know if will the M series intakes go on that motor. You're going to do air intake manifold if they have a better intake manifold for it, ported head, cams, headers, all those, or put some kind of supercharger or turbo on there. Dan, yeah, KZ1000 with on a go-kart would be nuts. So you want Savage? I don't really understand the phrasing of your question. Are you trying to use a 2-ring piston? And if so, why? James, I'd rather see it be fat and cold and keep running than try to squeeze a little bit extra out of it. There is a Turbo K series video. As a matter of fact, there's a couple of Turbo K series. It's not, the Big Bang one isn't up yet. The 3800 series block that we used, I have 2 of them. I have an L67 and an L32. How much boost can you push a plastic intake manifold? We've run 28 pounds on a fast manifold. Yeah, after being on the RD400 go-kart, that was more than fast enough for what for what I wanted to do. Pontiac, you want to send me a video? Just if you can ask the question, just ask me the question. I probably won't watch a video because I don't usually click on links because I get a lot of people sending me stuff that's either inappropriate or is just bad stuff. I don't know if I've run any of the Garrett TV series turbos. I would think that I have. I'm wondering if the 57 millimeter and the 46 millimeter I have from the guys way back from HP Performance when they did the twin modular kits, if those were TV series. Yeah, Butcher, then you can run nitrous on it. That obviously always makes a big difference. I haven't ever done one of the, well, I have done the Super Coupe 3.8 liter V6s from the Fords, but only on the chassis dyno. I always put my email up here whenever. But if anybody sends me anything, you have to make sure that you can't just send a picture of something. You have to tell me what it is and what your question is. Otherwise, I won't even look at it. I don't like getting unsolicited photos or videos without a description. If you want me to look at something, at least take the time to tell me what it is and tell me about it. Can you recommend anyone within 100 miles of Los Angeles to flow test my 07 4200 head? I don't know. The problem is you need somebody that can do 4-valve stuff, because they're going to have a fixture to actuate the valves. So it means they're going to have a plate that, that they can screw in, and you don't want to just do it with your fingers. That's not going to work very well. Yeah, the 335i engine is really good. On a 2005 Impala SS 3800 supercharged, can I spray 150 shot? Yes, you can, as long as you have the timing right. And can you retard the timing with your 150 shot? You have to be able to do that. And I don't know what kind of, if you have the ability to tune it, I would want to take timing out of it. Would you ever think about selling any of the engines that you have tested? I have 2 of them that are going to go up for sale here. I have a small block Ford and a Cadillac are both going to go away. Derek, I would like to see a video on what it takes to boost a motor with a single turbo, for example. I have a video up on a do-it-yourself, on just that, basically a do-it-yourself turbo kit that I did on an LS. And we just take the stock truck manifolds, make the Y pipe. You can buy a wastegate to put in that Y pipe somewhere, wherever it fits. The turbo, obviously, you need a drain line. And the people that you buy the turbo from, if you buy a DNA turbo or CX Racing, they have all the little things that you need. Like they have the drain fitting. Sometimes they come with the turbos. They have the feed fitting. They even have feed lines, like braided lines that you can run from a T fitting from some other oil pressure source. You're going to need the drain fitting. You're going to need a drain fitting in the pan. The guys from CX Racing have really cool like bulkhead fittings that all you have to do is just drill a hole in the pan, and then it's basically a double nut it with these like Celesta O-rings kind of, and you just tighten that up. It's got to fit, and obviously make sure that the crank or nothing hits it. And then you just slide the piece of rubber hose. So that's all we use. And then a hose clamp. That's all fairly easy. And then you need a V-band and an exhaust to go to your exhaust or to dump out, however you want to do that. And then the most difficult part usually, or the one that takes more time for us, is the aluminum tubing and clamps and silicone couplers that you need to go from the turbo, usually hopefully to an intercooler, and then up to your throttle body or your carburetor, whatever you're doing it to. I don't know if Joe Sherman will do that or not. I made 900 wheel horsepower with a TV 85, 11, 88 millimeter on a small block Chevy 408. If it's an 85 millimeter compressor, that seems like you could make more than that. I don't think you'd have a trouble running the nitrous on a little bit of fuel through the blower, especially if you're not spinning it at maximum speed. The HEI ignition will work under boost. Just bring the plug gap down. Did Andreas ever get back to you about his project? Doesn't ring a bell, so you have to remind me of what that is. Richard, I put my email up there. You can just send me an email. And like I said, right now, those are the only two that are going away. I have an aluminum headed 5-liter engine. It's carbureted, and it's somewhere near 400 horsepower, probably 385 or 390 horsepower, I think. And that one is, I just need to make room for the stuff that I have. And then the 500-inch Cadillac. Any work the Gen 4 Coyote stuff? I have not done any Gen 4. I've only done the first gen. What? The oil supply line that we normally do is a you could probably use a -4. I think that's what we use, a 4 or a 6. Yeah, 3 or 4. Derek, the software that I use is a Holly HP, and also I have done stuff with Fast in the past, and also now the Megasquirt I use on the 4200, and probably will use that on the Barrett as well. You were talking about doing subscriber car signs. Yes, I do want to do that. The problem is that the problem with testing ARC, the problem with testing a 4-valve with just the cam is that you can never go past whatever the lift is on the cam. And the people that think that the cam lift needs to be matched to that you only need to have the head flow at whatever the maximum lift of the cam is, they don't really understand what's going on. Have you ever seen a BMW R18 motorcycle? I have, yes. Electromotive, I haven't done any tuning with it, but when we ran the first 3800 back when Tom worked at West Tech, that's what he used as an electromotive to run the first 3800. What's the best heads on a 306-inch Ford? Take a look at the videos I have up where I tested 30 sets of small block Ford heads on, and there's lots and lots of good ones. 383 or 406 with a first TPI, more cubes is better. Well, what you're going to end up doing is making a lot more torque down low. The bigger the motor is, the lower the engine speed that intake manifold is going to want to make power at. Even though the first is probably better than most of the other TPI things, it's certainly better than the factory one, but it's still fairly long runner, I think. The Megasquirt that we have is an MS3 Pro. Opinion for budget-friendly ignition system to get rid of my old 7AL2 with the boost retard box, so it would be a 6AL2 program with MAP sensor. What's wrong with the 7AL2 that you have with the boost retard box? That should actually work fairly good with your distributor, right? Yeah, when somebody says the best head for whatever, then the rest of the question is it's almost impossible to answer. if you just tell me what kind of power you want to make and what the rest of the combination is, I can tell you. I'd probably list off 10 cylinder heads that will do what you want. Well, Donovan, there aren't 30 sets of small block Mopar heads available, so there's not that much aftermarket support for them. Jadis, I think I have a high ram versus, take a look at the LS intake video that I have up, and you can see what the difference is between a Trailblazer SS and a high ram. A high ram is going to lose a lot of power down low compared to the TBSS. It's going to make more power at the very top. So if you want a 7,000 RPM motor, and higher if it's a 5.3 or heaven forbid a 4.8. If it's a 4.8, you don't want a high ram. Admiral, you could also just tape stuff onto the camshaft and make it be whatever lift you want. There are lots of good 306 heads. You won't be able to say, I know that you want to say that you have the best 306 head. There's no such thing. Just tell me how much power you want. Do you find that torque-oriented cams run better with boosted setups? No, the boost that you add just adds to whatever is there. So whatever you want your power curve to be, you select the cam for that, and then just add boost to that. An SDS Simple Digital Systems EFI system, a brand new EM4 system in a box I bought years ago for a Datsun 510. I do like those. Riley, I knew it was at least 10. I bet it's improved quite a bit since 10 years ago. But you're still going to look at the same thing. The heads have not gotten a lot better since I did those tests. I mean, an Airflow Research 165 head is still a really good head. So is a Trick Flow head. The 11R head is really good. But the thing is, you don't need to buy an 11R head for your combination if it's a sub 400 horsepower 302, because you're not taking advantage of what any of those heads can do. You're just making a little bit more than you would if you picked a head that was less expensive. Your 6AL keeps melting distributor caps? Yeah, it can only pull the number of degrees per pound of boost. It's not ideal, but it still works. I ran my stuff for a long. I mean, I ran my stuff at the Silver State like that. Riley, I don't know about on the Mopar. I haven't done lots of back-to-back testing on the Mopar heads. Junkyard 6-liter LS 1,000 horsepower. What heads do I use? Use the ones that are on the 6-liter. Any factory LS head with 1,000 horsepower turbo and a camshaft is going to make 1,000 horsepower. You said you did some Gen 1 Coyote stuff. I never did anything that was 1,600 horsepower, though. I think we got close to 1,000 horsepower in some of the stuff, but not. We didn't go beyond that. So I'm not sure where the block strength limitation is on the first gen Coyote. Admiral, I think I have some early B head cam stuff up on the on the channel, and the cam is not going to determine where the power RPM is. And if you want peak power at 7 and peak torque at 4,700, that's a pretty broad range. What intake manifold are we going to use on that? Oh, I was talking about engine management systems. People, I get asked that question a lot. Well, what's the best engine management system? And the reality is that if you took a Holley and a Fast and a SDS or any of these things, and if you put them on an engine and it would give you the air fuel that you wanted and the timing that you wanted, then they would make the same power. 1,300 pound 510. That's very cool. I just like to have a regular stock 510, maybe with an SR20 in it. AFR 185s and GT40 intake. GT40 intake is okay, but it's not going to make the power that the other ones do, at least not at the top. The import scene does have someone like Richard Holdner. Richard Holdner's done lots on the import scene. I was just looking at several of the books that I wrote on Honda stuff. I did a B segment book that actually never came out. I was just happy that I got paid for it. But I've done lots of testing, designed lots of intake manifolds for the Toyota Yaris, for the Nissan Versa. I've done lots of import stuff. I'm the only one to run Honda engines at Westech on the engine dyno. I'm doing research for small block Chevy 350 MPG builds. Primary header length being longer on one side of a V8 for the crossover to the other side of the engine going to matter? No, it's not going to matter very much. If you look at the difference between long tube headers and stock exhaust manifolds, usually long tube headers make more power, especially down low. But if one of them is going to be longer than the other, it's not going to throw it off very much. Ooh, all the boosts have a 71 240Z turbo. I like that. Let's see. What's the most boost you'd put on a 392 Hemi? I've never run a 392 Hemi. The Kenny Bell's run a bunch of those, but I don't know how much boost you put on a stock one. And a turbo probably would be better for fuel economy. Although honestly, if you have either one of those on there, the way that you drive is going to determine your fuel economy. I want to ask the exact runner length for your custom B-headed intake. I don't know. A hot mess is in the house. How to get a lot of power and torque out of a 306 Ford turbo. Look at the 5-liter turbo videos that are up. I can tell you, Admiral, that we varied the runner length from, I think on the B-headed one, probably the longest was about 15 inches. And I think we went down to, and this is just the intake, not the head part of it. I'm thinking we went down to 4 or 5. Riley, I've not tested fuel mileage difference between a 347 and a 351. Again, if those were set up exactly the same, where everything was the same, you would need to think about things like the weight difference of the two. And again, the way that you drive it is going to make way more of a difference than what either one of those are going to do. I do like rock lobster though, but I like Planet Claire even better. Shane from Australia, you're looking at a Torque Storm. The Torque Storm supercharger is about a 700 horsepower supercharger. That's as much as they'll make. I mean, we could go to 750 or something, or might get a little bit more if we put them on a really big motor that was already making lots of power. But on a 5 liter, it's going to be about a 700 horsepower one when it's all wicked up. So if that's the kind of thing that you're looking for, we've run them on 5 liters before. I ran it on the 305 Chevy and also on the 302 Ford, and it worked good. You got an SVT Focus. I was just reading my Focus book today. If you take a look at the cover, do I have my Focus book here? I don't think I have it here. My wife is driving the car on the cover of that Focus book. I don't know if I can publish the unpublished book or not. I don't know what the part number is for the valve springs for that 351 question. I'm behind on my questions here. Let's see. What kind of power gains from lowering intake temps running around 190 after a couple pulls? Intercooler definitely is what I would recommend. Hoping I would give David Freiberger a hand for drag week. I would be good as the other guy in the booth, but my knowledge of drag racing would be limited compared to what Freiberger would bring to the table. I would be the comic relief and obviously an engine guy. I would like it much more if I was down in the pits and talking to the crew chiefs and stuff about their combinations. Your thoughts on EV max effort conversions for drag or land speed stuff? Drag racing for sure. Land speed stuff for electric is a little bit harder just to get them to last that long, but I think guys are doing it. And when we ran a hybrid Jetta for the guys from Volkswagen, hired us to do it, and we engaged the hybrid drive during the run, but not because it had a limited amount of battery life basically, and where it would stay active. And they had trouble getting the programming right because we were getting everything from Germany, and it was a big fiasco. They didn't just let us do what we wanted to do, but they were trying to engage that because it was an extra like 30 horsepower with the hybrid drive to, it was like a e-boost is what they called it. Casey, I have an RB25, and I also have a 241, a 1971 240Z. Oh, when was there an earthquake? James, I have Hugh's book, I have Corky's book. I have the Superpower book too. Who wrote the Superpower book? Oh, and Carson, okay. 4.4 though, that's hardly anything. Would be interesting to see you test pre-turbo blower gasoline E85 injection. Say 5 to 10% of total fuel. The guys from Engine Masters or at West Tech did that. They did that to try to do like this was a supercharger if I remember right, pre-supercharger fuel and then post-supercharger fuel to see if they could hit on a balance where they were limiting the amount of airflow that they displaced from the supercharger, but still getting the cooling. And they were kind of unsuccessful in finding a balance there. I'm not saying that there isn't, but they gave it a shot, and I wasn't part of that, but I thought it was going to be interesting that they were trying it. Noodles. The reason that people jump down to 0.050 number is so that you could compare camshafts basically from the same starting point, because a lot of guys were using advertised numbers, but when they're using advertised numbers, they were using different starting points. Some people would start their advertised numbers at 0. Some would start them at 2,000s or 5,000s or 6,000s. And so you had, and because of the way that consumers are, obviously more is better. So if a guy maybe had a 292 cam, the other guy could make a 294 cam because he was starting his measurement at a different spot without actually changing the cam. He's just advertising a different cam, and he's not lying about it, but they're manipulating the industry. And so I think that they kind of decided that the 50 number would be more realistic, and actually using both of those numbers tells you a little bit more about the ramp rate of the cam and stuff. Vin, you like the 400 stuff? Can you do a 434 stroker with the big Cleveland heads? Probably not. Although I do like the fact that it is a 400-inch Cleveland. Oh, the Superpower book is available now? I thought that it was out of print. Yes, the Jetta hybrid that did sail through the emissions testing, Tim. The interesting story about that is when they sent us the car from Germany, and we started taking it apart because we were getting it ready to have to do the cage and all the fabrication that Tom was going to do inside the car. They said, okay, well, we're going to be sending people over from Germany. We're like, what are you talking about? We're sending people over, safety people, so that they can take the hybrid batteries out, which is very dangerous for you guys to take disconnect the hybrid batteries and take them out. And so we're going to send people over, and we're sending you over all the safety equipment and documentation necessary to do that. We're like, dude, you need to just not even waste your time, because those are already sitting on the floor. They're like, what? I can't believe you did that. We're like, we have stuff to do. We're not waiting for 2 weeks until somebody comes over to show us how to disconnect a battery. Trust me, we can do that. Yeah, DFA, I don't even look at advertised numbers. I only look at the 50 numbers, because that's how I recognize camshafts. Yeah, the VW products did very well in the emissions testing. Just don't turn the wheel. Okay, we got 1 more minute. Who's going to get the last question? Who's going to get that last one? What do you know about Truck Norris? I don't know. I have to talk to Brian. I think that's one of Brian's cams, right? Yeah, I don't, Casey, I don't know about, I had a set of Fireball heads, which I think were darts back in the day. I think they used the Fireball name for a number of different cams, so you'd have to look and see what the specs are on that cam. Yeah, Tim, we had welding gloves on when we picked them up, but basically they're just giant quick disconnects. So it was not, it wasn't like, it wasn't too bad. The Edelbrock power packages that I've tested so far have all done very, very well. I tested the big block one, we tested the Ford one, and I think that the West Tech guys did a small block Chevy one, and they all did at least what they said. I do like RX-7s very much. And I was talking to a guy that actually knew me from back when I first started racing down in Holtville, and he was running, I think, RX-3s and 4s, which I kind of like even more. There's no ideal boost to back pressure ratio. You have to determine what kind of power you want from the turbo, and then determine what size motor you have and what the NA power output that you're starting with, and all of that stuff kind of comes into play. No, Dan, I haven't seen that. Is yours going to be faster? Is yours going to post a better time than the GT2 RS? What's the current G-Class blown modified record? I don't know. We don't run, I ran blown gas altered and blown gas comp coupe, I think, in the Civic. But a modified sport record would be more like an MR2 or something. Do you believe in porting and shimming LS oil pumps? Porting, I think, is probably a good idea. Usually oil pump housings have overhang and stuff in them, so I think that that's probably a good idea. But shimming the spring on them is only necessary if you need to make more pressure. Okay, this will be the last question that I got to get going. The EFI systems that I've said this many times, Hollywood, the systems that I use, that I tune with, because these are the ones that I know, the Megasquirt 3 MS3 Pro. So thank you guys for sending that out for the 4200 testing, and I can't wait to get back on that. The Holly HP and Dominator, and I'm sure that the Terminator X, but I don't use that because we have an HP there that's set up on the dyno, and we have harnesses for, Hemis and universal ones for distributor motors and LS3s and LS1s and all that stuff. So it's just really easy to hook up. So those are the ones I normally do. And fast also, we were doing lots of fast stuff back in the day, and I know how to tune that as well. At least I know how to tune it on the dyno and know what the wide open throttle air fuel is and the wide open throttle timing curves are and stuff. So we can have it make the power that I want, and we can run, whatever boost we want. I did all the tuning on the Big Bang stuff when we did the Engine Masters deal, when we ran it up to 1500 horsepower. So it's not, as long as you have an idea, like what kind of, the timing is the critical thing. You can have it be whatever air fuel that you want. But as you go up and boost, you have to know, hey, look, I can't be running 36 degrees of timing at 36 pounds of boost. That's not going to be a good combination. So you have to understand that part of it too. But luckily, I've been testing a long time and have a fairly good feel for what all of that is, having blown up, more than my share of motors. Thank you guys for showing up. I hope you guys all have a good Friday night. I've got to get going. We're going to go watch some fireworks, and then, it's all good. I'll see you guys all tomorrow. Do, 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 do.